Law and freedom. The struggle never had meaning for the man who is free, but for us it has a meaning because it is name and form that creates the world. We have a place for struggle in the Vedanta, but not for fear. All fears will vanish when you begin to assert your own nature. If you think that you are bound, bound you will remain. If you think you are free, free you will be. That sort of freedom, which we can feel when we are yet in the phenomenal, is a glimpse of the real, but not yet the real. I disagree with the idea that freedom is obedience to the laws of nature. I do not understand what it means. According to the history of human progress, it is disobedience to nature that has constituted that progress. It may be said that the conquest of lower laws was through the higher. But even there, the conquering mind was only trying to be free. And as soon as it found that the struggle was also through law, it wanted to conquer that also. So the ideal was freedom in every case. The trees never disobey law. I never saw a cow steal. An oyster never told a lie. Yet they are not greater than man. This life is a tremendous assertion of freedom, and this obedience to law, carried far enough, would make us simply matter, either in society or in politics or in religion. Too many laws are a sure sign of death. Wherever in any society there are too many laws, it is a sure sign that the society will soon die. If you study the characteristics of India, you will find that no nation possesses so many laws as the Hindus, and national death is the result. But the Hindus had one peculiar idea. They never made any doctrines or dogmas in religion, and the latter has had the greatest growth. Eternal law cannot be freedom, because to say that the eternal is inside law is to limit it. There is no purpose in view with God, because if there was some purpose, he would be nothing better than a man. Why should he need any purpose? If he had any, he would be bound by it. There would be something besides him which was greater. For instance, the carpet weaver makes a piece of carpet. The idea was outside of him, something greater. Now, where is the idea to which God would adjust himself? Just as the greatest emperors sometimes play with dolls, so he is playing with this nature. And what we call law is this. We call it law because we can see only little bits which run smoothly. All our ideas of law are within the little bit. It is nonsense to say that law is infinite, that throughout all time stones will fall. If all reason be based upon experience, who was there to see if stones fell 5 millions of years ago? So law is not constitutional in man. It is a scientific assertion as to man that where we begin, there we end. As a matter of fact, we get gradually outside of law until we get out altogether, but with the added experience of a whole life. In God and freedom we began, and freedom and God will be the end. These laws are in the middle state through which we have to pass. Our Vedanta is the assertion of freedom always. The very idea of law will frighten the Vedantist, and eternal law is a very dreadful thing for him, because there would be no escape. If there is to be an eternal law binding him all the time, where is the difference between him and a blade of grass? We do not believe in the abstract idea of law. We say that it is freedom that we are to seek, and that the freedom is God. It is the same happiness as in everything else, but when man seeks it in something which is finite, he gets only a spark of it. The thief, when he steals, gets the same happiness as the man who finds it in God, but the thief gets only a little spark with a mass of misery. The real happiness is God, love is God, freedom is God, and everything that is bondage is not God. Man has freedom already, but he will have to discover it. He has it, but every moment forgets it. That discovering, consciously or unconsciously, is the whole life of everyone. But the difference between the sage and the ignorant man is that one does it consciously and the other unconsciously. Everyone is struggling for freedom, from the atom to the star. The ignorant man is satisfied if he can get freedom within a certain limit, if he can get rid of the bondage of hunger or of being thirsty. But that sage feels that there is a stronger bondage which has to be thrown off. He would not consider the freedom of the Red Indian as freedom at all. According to our philosophers, freedom is the goal. Knowledge cannot be the goal, because knowledge is a compound. It is a compound of power and freedom, and it is freedom alone that is desirable. That is what men struggle after. Simply the possession of power would not be knowledge. For instance, a scientist can send an electric shock to a distance of some miles, but nature can send it to an unlimited distance. Why do we not build statues to nature then? It is not law that we want, but ability to break law. We want to be outlaws. If you are bound by laws, you will be a lump of clay. Whether you are beyond law or not is not the question, but the thought that we are beyond law. Upon that is based the whole history of humanity. For instance, a man lives in a forest and never has had any education or knowledge. He sees a stone falling down, a natural phenomenon happening, and he thinks it is freedom. He thinks it has a soul, and the central idea in that is freedom. But as soon as he knows that it must fall, he calls it nature. Dead mechanical action. I may or may not go into the street. In that is my glory as a man. If I am sure that I must go there, I give myself up and become a machine. Nature with its infinite power is only a machine. Freedom alone constitutes sentient life. The Vedanta says that the idea of the man in the forest is the right one. His glimpse is right, but the explanation is wrong. He holds to this nature as freedom and not as governed by law. Only after all this human experience we will come back to think the same, but in a more philosophical sense. For instance, I want to go out into the street. I get the impulse of my will, and then I stop. And in the time that intervenes between the will and going into the street, I am working uniformly. Uniformity of action is what we call law. This uniformity of my actions, I find, is broken into very short periods, and so I do not call my actions under law. I work through freedom. I walk for 5 minutes, but before those 5 minutes of walking, which are uniform, there was the action of the will, which gave the impulse to walk. Therefore, man says he is free, because all his actions can be cut up into small periods, and although there is sameness in the small periods, beyond the period there is not the same sameness. In this perception of non-uniformity is the idea of freedom. In nature, we see only very large periods of uniformity, but the beginning and end must be free impulses. The impulse of freedom was given just at the beginning, and that has rolled on. But this, compared with our periods, is much longer. We find by analysis on philosophic grounds that we are not free, but there will remain this factor, this consciousness that I am free. What we have to explain is how that comes. We will find that we have these two impulsions in us. Our reason tells us that all our actions are caused, and at the same time, with every impulse, we are asserting our freedom. The solution of the Vedanta is that there is freedom inside, that the soul is really free, but that the soul's actions are percolating through body and mind, which are not free. As soon as we react, we become slaves. A man blames me, and I immediately react in the form of anger. A little vibration which he created made me a slave. So we have to demonstrate our freedom. They alone are the sages who see in the highest, most learned man, or the lowest animal, or the worst and most wicked of mankind, neither a man, nor a sage, nor an animal, but the same God in all of them. Even in this life they have conquered relativity, and have taken a firm stand upon this equality. God is pure, the same to all. Therefore, such a sage would be a living God. This is the goal towards which we are going, and every form of worship, every action of mankind is a method of attaining to it. The man who wants money is striving for freedom, to get rid of the bondage of poverty. Every action of man is worship, because the idea is to attain to freedom, and all action, directly or indirectly, tends to that. Only those actions that deter are to be avoided. The whole universe is worshipping, consciously or unconsciously, only it does not know that even while it is cursing, it is in another form worshipping the same God it is cursing, because those who are cursing are also struggling for freedom. They never think that in reacting from a thing, they are making themselves slaves to it. It is hard to kick against the pricks. If we could get rid of the belief in our limitations, it would be possible for us to do everything just now. It is only a question of time. If that is so, add power and so diminish time. Remember the case of the professor who learnt the secret of the development of marble and who made marble in 12 years, while it took nature centuries.